So you think having all those kids was a response to your trauma?
Yeah, 100. Now I'm learning that now.
Some schools of thought out there where people are saying deal with your stuff before you get a child involved. But how realistic is that?
The child is going to pick up the same insecurity, the same navigation.
If it is wiser for pregnant women or expecting moms or even aspiring moms to really deal with their trauma prior to deciding or pursuing motherhood.
What are the wounds that you're still carrying?
Should all Black women go see a therapist before getting pregnant?
We're also programmed unconsciously and consciously.
I do think not only have we adapted individually, but we have created new norms as a community.
When a woman actually becomes pregnant, her identity begins to shift and change.
How much time is it going to take to work through that stuff? And I'm trying to get pregnant. All right. Recent posts on Encode by moms show that we all agree motherhood is tough. But are we making it harder on ourselves by not adequately preparing for motherhood? Are our children paying the price for our emotional baggage, unhealed wounds, and unhealthy behaviors that we bring to motherhood? How do we know if we're too messed up to be a parent? We unpack the complexities of the psychological journey to motherhood with psychologist Dr. Black, and one surprise guest pops in and weighs in on this controversial topic. The same concepts can be applied to fatherhood, so fellas, stick around and catch these pearls. While this talk will likely reveal things about your own life journey, this is not intended to be a replacement for you to seek individualized therapy. Comment, like, and share, and if you want more topics like this, hit the thanks icon. We thank you for watching, and don't forget to do what? Click subscribe. If it's one thing we all know, is the fact that childhood trauma definitely has adulthood impact. And it's said that about 2/3 of adults in the United States have had at least one adverse childhood event, whether that be poverty, abuse, experiencing a family member who may be addicted to drugs. So given that that's the case, the question then is, how much does the impact of childhood trauma or any other type of traumatic event have on a mom that's pregnant? And if it is wiser for pregnant women or expecting moms or even aspiring moms to really deal with their trauma prior to deciding or pursuing motherhood. So I'm really interested in this topic because this just even understanding the impact of childhood trauma in of itself, not exclusive to adulthood trauma, has really been eye-opening because you learn so much about not just the psychological impact, but the physiological impact and certain disease outcomes that are more common when a adult has a prior traumatic event. And so it's really interesting to me to really explore this topic because there are some schools of thought out there where people are saying deal with your stuff before you get a child involved. But how realistic is that? So I'm so excited to have you back on the couch, Dr. Black, because if there's one person to help me break down this topic, it is you. So help us understand first, how does trauma manifest in, or how can it potentially impact a pregnancy or a new mom?
Yeah, sure. So, first, understanding what trauma is very important.
Oh yeah,
So,
please,
trauma,
please, because I know we big T, we little T, and make little T big T all the time.
yes, yeah. So, we don't want to confuse trauma with stressors
Mm,
or unpleasant events. So, trauma is a psychological stressor to an actual life threatening situation or extremely dangerous situation. And this can be experienced or actually witnessed. So, you can actually experience trauma vicariously And some examples may be growing up in a household with a lot of arguments, physical violence, sexual abuse, etc. Vicarious trauma is so important to really, really understand and identify, is because that is the primary reason why we see a lot of generational trauma. It's by mirroring, watching, encoding what's normal and what's adaptive and what's not. So, in regards to going back to your original question, how it may impact women who are pregnant or women who want to become mothers or who are mothers, it impacts them greatly because if we do not understand what we're carrying within ourselves, we're not going to understand how another human being is actually encoding and receiving us. So, for instance, if there is a mom that experienced, let's say, emotional abuse, put downs, comparisons, an extension of the parent, right? Parentification. That's going to be so normal to the woman to where their first, second, third child may enter a parentified state as well. They may feel that the child is able to actually handle themselves emotionally without their presence. And that's just an example. But we pass down what was done to us.
When you say how someone is encoding us, what does that mean?
Yes. So
Because I
encoding,
got stuck there. I was like, encoding.
yes. So encoding, if you
Mm-hmm.
think about, we're more than just biological figures that have DNA and come out with this kind of human being impression.
Mm-hmm.
We come in with a clean slate. We come in
Mm-hmm.
with a biological temperament, but that temperament, the attitude, the perception, the brain, the neurology, the gait, the the things that the child learns in the world and how the child actually learns to actually experience friendships, other people, themselves. That is all learned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
program a computer, we're programmed as well, but we're also programmed unconsciously and consciously. So over time, if a baby learns that when I go to mommy, mommy doesn't want to be touched,
Mm-hmm.
mommy wants to be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, you will see that child actually withdraw, not really engaged with other children when they
I
are
see.
at school age. So it's really about understanding what are your coping mechanisms, what happened to you,
Mm-hmm.
were you parented, what are the wounds that you're still carrying, what was trauma, what were unhealthy modeling behaviors, because those are two different things.
Right.
But the trauma can include the unhealthy behaviors.
America, it seems like we're continuously exposed to some level of vicarious trauma just because of and we use this term also when we witnessed on social media or in television news broadcasting some type of injustice happen to another Black person.
Mhm.
Would that be true? Because we use the term vicarious trauma all the time, but would that qualify in terms of actually qualifying or meeting criteria for vicarious trauma?
Absolutely.
Now that you said confirm that yes, that is vicarious trauma, then my secondary comment, which you can address at the same time, is the fact that that's basically life as a Black person. So it almost puts a lot of Black moms automatically percentage wise just by the de facto of our experience as Black women in America
Mhm.
are more likely to have some type of traumatic events.
Mhm.
So even though the stats are pretty high, I think one particular study said about 35% of women admitted to having some type of childhood experience, adverse experience, and that's just childhood, not including adulthood. So you can imagine when you add the adulthood experiences, that number is going to be pretty significantly high. And then when you add the Black factor, I could just assume that that number is going to be almost a majority of Black women having some type of traumatic experience. So it almost makes me think then, should all Black women go see a therapist before getting pregnant?
I'll approach the question in this way. I believe everyone can benefit from therapy. That may be a
This
little
is true.
biased, yes, because as human beings, life is imperfect. And but specifically in African American community, it's always a good idea to speak to someone
Mm,
because you never know what you're carrying from your mother, from your ancestors, from societal norms and perceptions and views. And if we consider that statistically, children begin to actually recognize color and differences in race in elementary school. But the grouping, the segregation, the trials around difference and otherness becomes more prominent in middle school. So if
mhm,
you have not processed what it means to actually be a Black woman in the world yourself, you're going to really have a difficult time actually processing that conversation with your son or with your daughter.
mm,
And so it's absolutely important. What am I carrying, not only from the African American culture, but from how I'm experienced in society, how I'm experiencing society, and what do I do in order to actually navigate life? Because a lot of us don't really have the conscious awareness that we adapt unconsciously. So some things that may be abnormal may be normal to you, such as shape shifting.
mhm.
Now you have different dysregulated identities. That needs to be processed and actually worked through. Because if you're not secure in yourself, the child is going to pick up the same insecurity, the same navigation as you have developed in order to survive in the world.
Yeah, I do think oftentimes too that the awkwardness or the unusual behavior of a child is sometimes not always linked as what you're describing, a response to or a mirroring or some type of adaptation to certain behavioral characteristics of the parent. And
Mhm.
so because the child doesn't mirror the parent's personality or the parent's behavioral pattern, it's not connected that it's a response to and not necessarily the fact that the child isn't mirroring your behavior pattern doesn't mean that it's something innate to the child. It could be a response instead of a mirroring, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And so as I hear conversations from parents, especially as kids get older, and that very critical time happens into the transition into adulthood, where especially Black kids are now having some independence, because I think to a certain extent, collectively, we feel more comfortable when the child is a dependent so that you
Mhm.
have more control over what they do and where they go. But that
Mhm.
transition, I find just witnessing parents across the board, publicly, personally, professionally, struggle with that transition of
Mhm.
how do I keep this child protected? And I don't know what percentage of us have done the work to even understand our thoughts and our perspective on what we're trying to protect kids from, right?
Mhm.
Or how
Mhm.
we have adapted to needing that type of behavioral switch in
Mhm.
order to survive. And I
Mhm.
think to a certain extent, as Black people, we're always in survival mode, whether we're conscious of it or not conscious of it. So
Mhm.
even the habit of saying, I don't want to focus on that too much is an adaptation, right? It's a survival mode, right? I do think not only have we adapted individually, but we have created new norms as a community. right? So things that, for example, someone being avoidance to go somewhere after, late in the evening, there's an automatic understanding amongst the community. Oh yeah, we don't do that, right? There are certain things you would hear even casually, as let's say a tragic event happens and the person does some type of behavior that's atypical for us.
Mhm.
So, unfortunately, someone got harmed in the woods or got lost in the woods. And the response is, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And that's an acceptable behavior amongst that we've created sort of a grouping of behavioral patterns
Mhm.
that we self-identify as being what a Black person does and what a Black person doesn't do. And
Yeah.
I don't think we've done the work to understand fully how much we've decided as a community is acceptable behavior versus unacceptable behavior or atypical behavior is really us saying, in order to survive, we don't do X, but we do A, right?
Mhm.
And so, how do we get to the level of consciousness
Mhm.
that we probably should be preemptive about getting therapy and working through this stuff? And then, my second question to that is, our clocks are ticking.
Mhm.
And they're ticking fast. And a lot of because whether regardless of the Black story, across many countries, even internationally, the Black story is very similar because there's been so many of our countries have been colonialized, right?
Mhm.
And so we're talking about hundreds of years of intergenerational trauma that has been passed down, that has sort of molded us into the people that we are now. How much time is it going to take to work through that stuff? And I'm trying to get pregnant, right? So,
Sure.
because that could take a lifetime to work through. So,
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
we balance our biological clock versus
Mhm.
our psychological healing?
Yeah, absolutely. What I will, and because that's a very heartfelt question and very, very layered. And what I want to make clear is that you do not have to put off parenting or having a child and bringing a life into the world because the world is imperfect and always will be. But if you have more trauma is more pronounced,
Mm-hmm.
that it's an emergency situation. You have to work through it. You can work through it before, you can work through it during pregnancy and after. Because depending on the sum of your story and your emotional and psychological state determines how long and how useful therapy will be. Some people stay in therapy for 6 months. Some people
Mm-hmm.
come in and out of therapy, and some people stay in therapy for the rest of their life. But you don't have to actually pause becoming pregnant. But if you have any type of pronounced triggers, such as flashbacks,
Mm-hmm.
such as any psychosocial stressors, such as poverty, because
Mm-hmm.
poverty is a trauma as well. And I'll say a little bit about that as we move forward. But
Mm-hmm.
any panic attacks, any type of pronounced physical or emotional response that dysregulates your life. If it dysregulates your life, it's going to impact your child. And
Mm-hmm.
things are going to be 10 times, probably 2 times worse. So, in that stance, but in regards to working through historical racial trauma, that's going to take a lot of education, therapy, a lot of self confidence,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of reflection,
Mm-hmm.
really, really sewing into your self worth, your self confidence, your community. There are things that you can do collectively to continue to actually sew into your identity and safety as a Black woman or a man in the world.
Okay.
So that is a little bit different than working through actual physical or emotional or psychological trauma.
One of the things that I thought was really surprising, even to me as an obstetrician, is learning that the prevalence of PTSD, I saw in one source said that the prevalence of PTSD is actually higher in pregnant women than in non-pregnant women.
Mhm.
And it made me think of it made me think about the fact of how vulnerable pregnancy is,
Mhm.
and just how likely you are to have unexpected triggers. So for the individual who thought that they were good and doing well psychologically, because I think a lot of people do think they're doing well psychologically. Um, I really do wonder if, as in a larger conversation, in a more of a public health conversation, whether at the preconception appointment, whether we should now be including identifying things like this, because we don't do it. We talk about, their immunization history, their nutrition history, their wellness regimen, their
Mhm.
prior medical issues, their prior pregnancies, and are they on folic acid? But there's really no good assessment as to their traumatic history. We do, I will say, my own practice, we do an initial screening for adverse childhood experiences with the initial intake of the initiation of their prenatal care. But at that point, it seems like it's almost not too late, but later than we should.
Mhm.
Because if some women are not self-aware, yet we have a higher prevalence of PTSD during pregnancy, and the triggers can be as subtle as an unwelcome touch during the exam, and that could be touching by listening to the heart or listening to an inadvertent, I'm not talking about an inappropriate, but inadvertent touch can be triggering, or someone triggered because they were interrupted and didn't get to ask their question. And it brought back historical trauma from being the middle child and no one's listening to you, you know? And I say that lightly, but these are very well known triggers, and they're more serious triggers, such as the pelvic exam itself, that can be a trigger for someone's prior sexual abuse.
Mhm.
So given the fact that most people aren't as self-aware that they may be harboring a traumatic history, um, on a larger scale, what should we be doing as providers?
One of the most powerful questions that I ask, especially my patients who become pregnant during treatment, is what was your first thought when you found out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That question will give you a window to where the woman is in her life. The second is the ACE questionnaire is really great, but I also use something called the PCL5 that's
Mm-hmm.
specifically trauma related in a way where it's easy, it's comprehensible, and it actually just gets a little more information very,
Mm-hmm.
very quickly.
Now, why do you, for all the clinicians who may be watching, why do you advise adding that? Like, what additional information do you think we can get from that versus just the ACE?
So the ACE questionnaire is a broad view of all type of life circumstances. The PCO5 has to do specifically with PTSD
Mm-hmm.
because there's different levels of trauma. And someone can have trauma and actually not know it. But the PCO5 is worded so specifically to where it's easy to comprehend for the patient and for the clinician. It's very short, it's directly to the point. It covers physical, sexual, emotional, psychological abuse in many different forms and many different in a different time span.
Mm-hmm.
So the ACE is more of a general over.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been divorced? Have you,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
So it's really just pointing to what is happening with her in her physical body in her mind and her emotions. And so I find that that's absolutely helpful. But also, what I do see and recognize is that there's a lot of triggers that come up because the woman has not been, especially if this is a first time mom,
Mm-hmm.
the mom hasn't been in this state before. So, psychologically, what happens in a pregnant woman is that when a woman actually becomes pregnant, her identity begins to shift and change internally and externally. And so there's an increase of memories.
Mm-hmm.
There's an awareness of the body actually
Mm-hmm.
changing.
Mm-hmm.
So the body is actually firing off different neurological symptoms. The world around her and in her is changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's when a lot of content material memories begin to actually come up,
Yeah.
especially with women with young children. All of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, they have these reoccurring memories. I remember when I was 4, and this happened to me, and that's why I'm a little overbearing with my child.
Mm-hmm.
Your anxiety and your trauma now becomes the child. Now I'm overcompensating for a child that does not have my story.
Right.
And so,
Right.
yeah,
So the child doesn't have the perspective to even understand that behavior pattern, nor the intellectual ability to do so. The
yes,
child is just experiencing that anxiety. And whether the child can verbalize it or not, they can detect that, as they say nowadays, that energy.
yes,
So if it's one thing I love is a pop-up. And I am so excited because we are about to talk about what is the perspective of the mom when it comes to rearing a young child, the transition from pregnancy into motherhood, and how your past experiences may impact you. So, Attorney Watts, who some of you are very familiar with because she's been on our platform before,
Yes.
and while her professional life is clearly very important, today we're going to talk about her other more important, some would say,
Mm-hmm.
role
Mm-hmm.
as a mom. So thank you
Yes.
for joining us, Attorney Watts.
No problem.
Dr. Black just broke down everything for us. So now we
Okay.
feel ready to really have this deep conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So in what ways do you either have witnessed or as a mom yourself, you can now see how someone's past adverse experiences, whether as an adult or as a child, may mold how you parent?
Mm-hmm. I see it, I feel it almost every day. Like I'm an older mom, and part of me is glad that I waited as long as I did to have kids because I feel like if I had done it when I was younger, I wouldn't have been as patient. And some days I still feel like I'm not very patient. I'm like, oh my gosh, my temperament, I feel like is quicker. And it could be perimenopause. I don't know.
All of
But
the above, which is a whole other topic we need to do.
right. So I have a 2-year-old, soon to be 3-year-old in about a month or so, and he does what little kids do. But in my head, I can remember I play these scenarios in my head, like if that had been me doing that when I was growing up, I would have gotten popped, I would have gotten spanked. Like and I'm like, I didn't realize how much of I think a child sort of got, I don't want to say beat, but just
Mm-hmm.
sort of shoved down. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to remind myself, he's 2. That's what 2-year-olds do. He runs around and falls on the floor. And yes, when I'm downstairs, because there's not a lot of insulation between the 2 floors, it sounds like he's coming in on the floor. But why
Mm-hmm.
am I going to beat a 2-year-old for running around and falling out? Because that's what they do, because that's what would have happened to me when I was a kid. Like I could hear, I'm like, my mother would have been screaming like, sit down. I don't want to hear that over my head. And I get it. You worked long day and the kid is running around trampling and you're just tired. But the
Mm-hmm.
response should not be, you know, make them feel bad, try to hurt them for doing something that kids do. And so I have to always remind myself and get rid of those tapes of what would have happened to me if I had done that when I was a kid. and make sure that I have gotten rid of that, tried to deal with that, gotten over that, so that I'm not putting onto him the stuff that would have happened to me. And I think a lot of parents do that. Well, it was fine for me, so it'll be fine for them.
Right, right.
But was
And
it fine
you
for
start
you?
you start to repeat exactly well
Yes.
that part. Was it
Was
really
it?
fine for you?
Yeah.
Right.
Was it fine for you?
But how did you become so self-aware of that pattern? Like, how did you realize that that pattern exists? Because for a lot of us, that sit down, be quiet,
Mm-hmm.
stop running around is
Mm-hmm.
normalized, right?
Yeah.
It becomes uh part of our normal behavior pattern. And to your point, it may be a reflection of mom is exhausted. She's worked long hours because we tend to work long hours because we
Yeah.
have to survive. And for me, it could also be, making sure that we don't lose our housing because we live in a
Mm-hmm.
multi-level
Yeah.
housing. We're
Right.
renting, and we want to make sure that the neighbors don't complain because this is all we got. We don't have as much option. So getting back to the poverty part, which Dr. Black, I don't want to miss that conversation either. Um, so how did you get to the point where you're like, wait a minute, I think this emotion or this feeling
Mhm.
is drawing from my personal experience, but I'm going to challenge that. How did you get to that point?
I would say I'm a person that definitely believes in therapy. I probably had my first session in middle school. Now, it wasn't prolonged when I was that young. It wasn't until I got to college that I really started really delving into the therapy process, because at that point, all of the childhood, adverse experiences that I had were sort of coming to a head at college. And
Mm,
really becoming prevalent and making me feel like I have to deal with this, because it was a lot of stuff that was bottled inside that was coming out. So you're talking to a person that has done therapy in many different stages of life for long periods of time. And I had always felt like I wanted to be a mother, but I was conscious of, I knew I wanted to be a mother sort of to correct everything bad that had happened to me. That is not the reason to become a mother. But I was
mm,
aware of that was my trigger, and this is what I wanted to do. And a lot of people have that,
mhm.
like, all these bad things happened to me, so I'm going to have my own family and recreate what I feel
I
like
hear that all the time. I will
should have
definitely
been
say I
done.
hear that all the time. People say
But
that all the time.
in that, you have to deal with, well, what were the things that happened to you, and deal with those things. Because just thinking you're going to have this little person and they're going to behave in the way that you think they should, they're going to respond to whatever it is that you're giving them in the way that you think. Kids don't do that. You have
Hmm.
to allow that your child is going to be their own person and have their own personality. So how you think they should respond to whatever it is that you're doing, they may or may not, because they're going to be their own person. And then their experiences are not going to be what yours are. So you have to deal with all of those things that have shaped you, good and bad, and deal with that, and not then try to put all of those things on this little person. Because if you are trying to put all your hopes and dreams of what could have, should have happened when you were a kid onto this person, you're going to get disappointed. And so
Hmm.
that's why I remind myself all the time, this is not a do-over of LaShawn's childhood. This gets to be his childhood. And I'm going to give him all the things that I wish I had, but most of that is love. And the other part of that is autonomy, and letting him be him and have his childhood experiences, and try not to taint that as much as possible. So I think I'm probably, because of therapy, much more aware what my triggers are. And so I try not to put those on him. And I remember Kiki Wyatt, when she had her reality show a long time ago, the reason she
Hmm.
said she kept having children was she wanted unconditional love. And I was thinking, oh my God,
I feel like I've heard that. Yeah.
if that's the
Yeah.
reason why she keeps having all of these kids, man, like
Yeah, but that's really
that's going to be a problem.
and that's sort of an example of the adverse outcomes that can happen when we don't deal with some of
Yeah.
these historical or personal experiences that we've had that is molding the type of parent we think we're going to be. Dr. Black, So LaShawn brought up something I thought was really, really interesting is the fact that I have personally heard people say, I'm going to redo or undo what I experienced as a child in my children. And they mean the best, they mean I'm going to give my kids the things that I didn't have, I'm going to allow my kids to be more free. I'm going to allow my kids, it could be a variety of things. I'm going to allow my kids to play with more diverse populations. I've heard it all.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Is that necessarily a bad thing? Because is it really bad to want to give your kids things that you didn't have?
Mhm. No, you can always have a standard and you always want the best for your children. So we want to understand all the good things that we want to provide them. But we also want to understand our motivation as well. And the example that you gave in regards to having children for unconditional love or redoing a family, the problem with that is you're projecting a fantasy into the future and creating a dynamic where the child actually has to show up in the way that you fantasized about.
Hmm.
Yep.
So there's something called projection, but also projective identification, where the child becomes exactly what the parent wants them to be and doesn't have enough room to actually explore, self actualize, and become who they really are meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't want children to actually foreclose because mom had plans for me even before I was created
Mm-hmm.
that I was
And
going
they
to
do.
actually be a pilot. you know, I'm
Right.
going to stay away from these group of people. I'm going to actually do all this. There are mothers that puts children in 10 or 15 different activities and sports.
Mm-hmm.
But can they handle it? What
Right.
is the cost of it? What is the reason for it? Mom didn't have any outlets. So we have to be careful of actually projecting our needs, wants, fantasies, and desires onto another totally different human being.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're going to be part of our genetic DNA, but they
Right.
also should have their free will as well. And when you have a projective identification onto a child, that child becomes the mother's supply now.
Mm.
And so the identity, the fulfillment, right, the excitement, the happiness is actually all the pressures on the child
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
to keep mommy happy.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we want to actually understand what is the motivation about it, but absolutely have the dreams and visions for your children.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
that's different.
When you were pregnant, did you notice any triggers during pregnancy, or did you notice anything in terms of your experience as a pregnant woman, whether with the system or just going to your appointments, or even just the experience of being pregnant, that could be a trigger for moms?
Not during my pregnancy. I think I was probably hyper aware of the, maternal mortality rate for Black women. So that is sort of what I think I caused angst for me is okay, I want a Black doctor and I'm just hoping, and I did not have one, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, but I was just like, okay, in my head, preparing to make sure that, okay, if something doesn't feel right, is it off? Am I going to make sure that I'm advocating for myself or I have someone else advocating on my behalf saying, no, this doesn't feel right? Just making sure that everything went right. And that was, I think, my biggest angst in being pregnant is, are we going to get through this? And
Right.
are there going to be any complications? So that I knew. But that was, I mean, for me, I think that was the only really trigger because I
That's
don't.
another great point, though,
Mhm.
because Dr. Black, what is that called? Because Black women know, it's very well known that there is a high mortality rate when it
Mm,
comes to Black pregnancies in the US and many other developed countries as well. It's just more pronounced or the worst in the US. Is that traumatic to know those numbers and to enter into a pregnancy?
Absolutely, because now we're getting into life and death,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because these are factual statements and statistics.
Right.
So you're in a very, very vulnerable state, and you're at the mercy of doctors or doulas.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is an increase in anxiety. There are fantasies about the motivation
Mm-hmm.
of, certain physicians. And
Mm-hmm.
I often hear, even with my patients who become pregnant, they want a Black doctor, as was mentioned, but they also, I'm seeing a lot of difficulty with appointments, with taking their questions seriously, with actually being
Mm-hmm.
overly occupied because they can't actually lie in the trust that the provider actually understands and knows and has their best interests in mind. So
Yeah.
it does actually put stress on the pregnancy. There
Mm-hmm.
is a hypervigilance and awareness of every movement or non movement, every single ache, pain. Everything is pretty much magnified. And
Right.
so, in that, we have to be mindful because that also creates stress in the brain. And baby's brain and mom's brain is connected.
Mhm.
Whatever the mom feels, the baby feels. And that actually shapes the temperament to the child.
I get that question all the time. Can you repeat that one more time? Because there are people who are going to want to really hear that part.
Yeah.
What mom experiences, baby experiences, how is that connection happening?
Yeah. So mom's brain, baby brain is connected. So everything that the mom experiences, feels, and even hears, it's actually using a word encoded again, encoded into the baby. That's why babies can actually recognize voices when they're out of the womb. That's why they can actually understand what mommy is actually feeling. The baby's emotional life is impacted with whatever mom is feeling. If mom is feeling happy, the neurological system is nice, healthy, balanced state. Of course, we're not in bliss all the time as human
Right.
beings,
Right.
but to be under just very high stress, a lot of anxiety, or even depression, mommy's brain is changing. Mommy brain is secreting hormones that is actually going through the blood brain barrier and actually going into your baby.
Let
So,
me find out Nana and the abuelas knew something. Because a lot
They
of
do.
our grandmas and old women would say this stuff, but science hadn't really proved it yet. So it's amazing to hear that there is now scientific proof that there is a connection between the two.
absolutely, yes. And it really, really, it shapes it because our brains are neuroplastic. You can work with an infant that's been exposed too much in the neonatal through trauma,
Hmm.
such as if a mother was in a car accident or physical
Hmm.
harm or sexual abuse. All of that is called teratogens, right? Stress
Hmm.
hormones actually impacts your baby,
Hmm.
the sac of the baby, and they're in that fluid. So
Hmm.
there's so many different nerve cells from your umbilical cord to the babies. But we have to keep in mind, because I hear a lot of talks about physical and mental health, but the brain controls emotion. So
Hmm.
your brain is always in control. Whatever mommy is thinking, feeling, baby's also feeling. Not to the extreme extent, because they
Right. But
don't.
it's fetal
Exactly.
programming is happening.
Yes, because their eyes, ears, and note their olfactory, all of that is actually protected in the womb.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
so they don't have the whole sensory, the information about what's happening. All they feel is the emotion. And there are many more studies that are being developed around this.
That's so fascinating to me. I feel like I need to be in class So do you think, or is there a point I should ask first, where you feel like, okay, if you're at this point, then you're ready to pursue a pregnancy, and motherhood. But if this is going on, you should probably hold up. Or is there such a point?
Um, I would say if you've never gone to therapy, I would probably start. I I believe that therapy is important for everyone, and
You're gonna
even
make Dr. Black so happy with these comments.
I because I really feel like I wasn't here for the discussion on trauma, but whatever you feel like your trauma or triggers are, and especially there are conversations about the dynamics between mothers and daughters and how that's a different dynamic and can sometimes be a stressful dynamic,
Hmm.
more so than fathers and daughters and fathers and sons. It's their own thing. So I would say if you never had therapy, I would definitely put off having kids because you don't know sometimes a lot of the stuff you've dealt with because our brains are very powerful things. They have a way of protecting us from information that that it knows would be hard for us to process. So some of us have forgotten or have pushed it away so far down in our psyche that we have forgotten some of our things. And it's not until you have a kid that triggers something that you're like, oh, whoa. And sometimes it's in
Mm,
relationships too. It's in friendships. You never know what's going to be the mirror or the thing that prompts you to remember something that you've been trying to forget. And so
mm,
I mean, there are so many childhood things that you have to deal with, and most of it is forgiving yourself for the things that happened to you. Because I know that was one big thing for me is like all these things happened to me in childhood that could be attributed to someone else, but who was getting carrying the most of the blame was me. And that's who I really needed to forgive the most is me. And then
mm,
there's usually other people that you need to forgive, apologies that may not ever happen and may not never come or come in the form that you wanted to. Forgiveness is a big thing. But in order to forgive, you have to deal with the situation and the relationship and the issue it is that causes you harm. And you never
mm,
know what the thing is. It could just be maybe you and maybe you feel like you grew up okay, but you have an issue with weight. Like
mm-hmm.
Taylor Townsend was talking about, that she has these tapes of her grandmother and mother. Oh, you shouldn't wear that. Oh, you can't wear that. Oh, you can.
Yeah.
That is something that will play on and that you will pass on to your kids. It could be something as little as that, or even like you said, poverty, can't turn the lights on here, not wasting food. All those things we transfer on to our kids. Like you can't get up from the table until you finish every bite on your plate. That's
Hmm.
something that we get from our childhood if we grew up poor
Yeah.
because we had to eat what was put in front of us and we had to finish it all. But those are
Hmm.
things that people don't think about when they're having kids that they pass on. And like I said, I want my son's experience to be his own, and I don't want it to be a result of me feeling like I'm trying to do something over or I'm playing all the tapes in my head that haven't gone away from things. So I don't know if you
Hmm.
can really tell someone a point that they are ready because everyone's journey through therapy is different. And I'm
Hmm.
still in a journey.
Hmm.
I am now able to respond to things that I would have dealt with differently,
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
different way now. I'm able to think about things in a different way now. So it's a lot of growth and maturity that comes, and I think people will have to figure it out for themselves. But I mean, for me, parenthood is a journey in and of itself. You're not gonna get it right all the time. You're not gonna be perfect. Your kids are not gonna always respond to you in the way that you think they should or you want them to.
Hmm.
But I would say one thing I think people don't realize is that when you're a parent, you're trying to do the best that you can. So while you may feel like your parents didn't do everything you wanted them to, you have
Hmm.
to give them grace and say they did the best they could at the time with what they had. And the same thing you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing the
Hmm.
best that you can at the time with what you had. And if we extend that grace to our parents and we'll want that grace extended to us, then, I think we can navigate this journey of parenthood that doesn't come with the manual, you know.
Yeah. Did you ever second guess your ability to be a parent based on your experiences? Did you ever have that moment?
I think I probably have it all the time. Like I get like tonight. I had something to do at a certain time. And tonight happens to be the night that my son decided he didn't want to go to bed the way that he normally does. So guess who's impatient now, irritated is me because I'm like, I have something I have to do. And I need you to go to bed. And I'm like, so I have to talk to myself, calm
Uh-huh.
down. If he doesn't go to sleep on time, he doesn't go to sleep on time.
Right,
Whatever it is
right.
that you needed to do, just will have to get pushed back
It'll
and
work
someone will
itself
have to
out. Yes.
understand. And so I
Yes.
get a little frustrated at me. It's like, why are you getting frustrated with a 2-year-old? So I have to, talk myself
Mm.
through the fact, okay, allow
Mhm.
yourself, you got upset, calm down, relax, relate, release, and come back to
A
it. But
reset.
sometimes, yeah, I do get frustrated with me because I'm getting frustrated with him because he's just doing what kids.
But you're like an A+ student when it comes to therapy, right? Like you're so very self-aware, whereas folks like me will be like, listen, now I have gotten better, but listen. The patience, my
And
goodness, the
I
patience.
still and I still feel like my patience is not where I want it to be. And
Mhm.
that's what drives me nuts is because I'm like, I gotta be more patient. I can't respond to him
But I think the
in anger.
self-awareness is great because a lot of people aren't self-aware. They go into rage. And
Which is this is why I'm like, if you don't deal with your stuff, the having a child is the worst way to deal with your issues because all you're going to do is put a different set of issues on this other person and then create another person with a lot of issues. And I see it. I mean, I could pick it out in all these reality TV shows and regular TV shows that I see
Mhm.
it, see how people parent, and I see the extremes. It's like, I didn't have anything when I was a kid, so now my kids get everything, and there are
And they
no
don't work for
rules,
anything.
and there are no boundaries, and they're my
Right,
best friend, and and I'm like, oh my
right.
God, that's
Yeah.
not the that's not the answer to resolving that. You need to deal with those issues, or making your kids your best friend. I don't believe in that either. I'm like, there's
Mhm.
no reason why you should be telling your kids all of your personal, intimate details, especially as it relates to your relationship with their father or mother.
Right,
Like,
right.
whoa, because
Yeah, but people do that because they
yeah.
feel like they wanted that type of connection with their parents or some close intimacy with their parents and didn't have it. One of the things you said really triggered me,
Oh.
which is the comments about having to finish your plate and eat all your food, because I could definitely tell you, not that I truly felt pressured a lot in that sense, but I definitely went back and forth between she's not eating a lot, she's eating too much, and that was a lot of my childhood. But I have noticed that as an adult, and I think I've shared this on this platform before, that I still have the problem where I am always thinking about making sure I have food for tomorrow, right? Like there's no no planning about making sure, okay, if you eat this today, what are you going to have for tomorrow? And so what I eat today is only because I figured out what I'm going to have for tomorrow. So I definitely have seen my poverty, or the poverty experience and how it plays into my adulthood. And like you, I try to kind of notice and be self-aware of my thoughts and my behavior patterns as a result of
Mhm.
it. So sometimes I challenge myself to be spontaneous and not have a plan about food, right? Like go out on a limb, right?
I I
But
I understand because I do some of it. Some of it I still do with my son, but I feel like it's in a good way, like in terms of boy messing up these clothes, but he's not messing up the clothes, it's the teachers. And his dad thinks I'm crazy, but I'm like, why are they letting him paint without a smock? Like they send these clothes home to me with paint and food and stuff all over them, and then I
uh-huh.
soak them and I'm trying to get them clean. And I'm like, do they just think I have money to spend? There
Right,
is no
right,
money
right,
tree
right,
out there.
right,
I
right.
I worked
So,
hard for these clothes and I don't
right,
want them coming back to me like
right. I totally get that mindset. I totally get that mindset. So, Dr. Black, you were going to share with us just how, because this doesn't feel like trauma, it just feels like this is just how it is and this is how we think, right? We can be lighthearted about it. So, how is poverty or the poverty experience a traumatic experience?
Poverty in itself doesn't have to always lead to trauma because
Okay.
there are people that thrive in poverty. and go on to do really, really great things in the world and live stable and secure lives. But it comes out in micro ways. One of the things that I do see, we see poverty as a deprivation, as an absence, stress, anxiety. But also, the number one thing that is always missed when we think about poverty is this is also how we actually learn our relationship with money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, poverty is connected to finances. So, however, mom and dad navigated finances, you unconsciously actually pick up the same attachment and relationship with money. So even if you have a six-figure job, you still may keep all the lights off,
Mhm.
right?
I literally go around and turn off the lights.
I do too. I do too.
Yes. Yes. So, or just the opposite,
Mm-hmm.
because every time I asked for a new pair of shoes when I went to school, and all the kids actually teased me because they knew my mom couldn't afford it. Now I
Mm-hmm.
have 400 pair of shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So you can go from one extreme to another,
That's very true.
but that question, what is my relationship with money and resources? How do I make myself secure in the world? Or how do I overcompensate?
Mm-hmm.
Those are really, really great questions because a lot of parents do not have financial conversations with their children. They
Yeah.
just learn it. They hear the conversations. They hear mom and dad on the phone with the bill collector. They're saying that's the word. Oh, it's just something cheap, or that's too
Mm-hmm.
much. Now
Mm-hmm.
you're teaching your child a ceiling, an unconscious ceiling of what's too much and what's too cheap.
Right. Right.
So it's really about how you're using language
Mm-hmm.
as well. And
Yeah,
so
I've definitely
poverty, yes.
I would say I've definitely witnessed both ends. I've definitely witnessed
Yep.
and experienced the underspending,
Mhm.
because I'm literally in that phase, right? But I think I'm in a minimalistic phase transition. But I've definitely have gone from the excess, and when I say excess, it's not like, you know, Imelda Marco, is that was her name?
Yes, that was her.
Not that level, but I've definitely also witnessed the people who excessively spend, like to the point of not having what I would say most people will consider a standard savings or standard
Mhm.
cushioning financially, and they, just spend however and just because they want to, and why not. So I can definitely see the traces of that in my personal life and the traces of that just from witnessing my community around me, and how people make different decisions, whether to move somewhere, where to live somewhere because of their I guess their ceiling that's been set for them, even from childhood, as to what's an expensive home or what's an affordable home. And that really does kind of mold your entire life because your neighborhood becomes and nurtures you in a certain way, in a certain pattern. And then from as business owners, like how much of a risk you would take, how conservative you are. And it really does have impact as to whether or not you have these boundaries that block you from success because you're still dealing with sort of your poverty mindset. Whereas other people, will take multiple risks, go bankrupt multiple times, right? So it's just really interesting how we can trace all of these experiences into adulthood. And I think one of the most critical time period is motherhood. And motherhood is such a major life-changing experience, a transition that although fathers go through their own transition, I think motherhood is a very unique transition for the obvious reasons, right? So I thank you guys for helping me to gain understanding of this because I'm a really take some of this into my own practice and be a little bit more trauma informed with my patients and helping them and guide them through their own process, and just making therapy more preventative as opposed to necessarily therapeutic. As I don't know, is therapy preventative?
It is. I think so.
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Yeah,
Because we're always
it
kind of addressing
definitely
something.
is.
Because we all got issues, so we all kind of addressing something at some point.
Yeah, but
But
the point is to not repeat those things all the time, right? So yes, therapy is preventive in that way. And I would say people really should, it's just like when you go into marriage, how you have
uh,
marriage counseling, why don't you have
sure,
like prenatal counseling?
yeah,
Because people really want to know, like before you get married, they're asking, what is your motivation? What are you expecting from your partner? What do you want to get out of this? What happens if this happens between you and your partner? And no
mm-hmm,
one says the same thing about parenthood because, okay, you want unconditional love for your child, but do you not understand that really love from children does have conditions on it? It really is based on Christmas gifts and birthday parties. And do I have this? Like, am I getting the $10,000 prom
yeah,
dress, which I don't? But, a lot of what kids want from you is really conditional. Like, I don't,
mm-hmm.
like some kids do say, I'm not saying kids don't love you because you're
Right,
their
right, right.
mom.
No, I
They love
get
you
you.
because you're their mom and their dad, and adverse
Mm-hmm,
things can happen and your kids will still love you. But for the most part, a lot of what kids want from you, their love is conditional. So it's
mm-hmm.
like, what happens if your kid responds to you like this? Or what happens if you do and sacrifice all this for your child and then when they turn 18, they
Yeah,
turn their back on you? How are you
yeah,
going to deal with that? Or what happens if this scenario comes up with your kid and they don't come and talk to you about something, or they do lie to your face after you've told them not to? Like, how are you going to deal with those things? Because if you're putting all your hopes and dreams on this child, you're going to be disappointed. Like if you're
yeah.
putting all your happiness in your partner for them to make you happy, you're going to be disappointed. So just like you need to be whole in a relationship, you need to be whole in your parenting and be
Mm-hmm,
ready for anything that could happen. What if your child, God forbid, dies?
mm-hmm.
Like how are you going to deal with that transition if you are putting everything onto this person?
Right, right,
Mhm.
right, right.
So there's,
And that's how a lot of people's lives fall apart, right?
yeah,
Because they in some way idolize their child, right?
yeah,
Their child becomes their idol. Yeah, no, that's powerful. That's very powerful. I was telling Dr. Black that I think I'm going to in some way incorporate this type of questioning in my preconception care, even though a lot of
good.
people don't come for preconception care, but we're trying to work
Hmm.
on improving those numbers and making people know that it gives you so much opportunity to really prepare in the healthiest way you can and optimize your readiness for pregnancy and your readiness for parenthood. So I really do think this conversation has convinced me that I'm going to incorporate at least a few questions where I can then offer patients the opportunity to sit with a therapist. Now, my concern is I feel like as a community, we don't prioritize therapy. And so even if I identify something, I'm not quite sure just the acceptance of the recommendation. Because even when I have clientele personally, or just even my personal life, people who are acutely depressed or acutely
Hmm.
anxious, it's still a work to convince them that they should receive therapy. So I hope we get to the point where therapy is so accepting and so normalized, then we can really get into the preventive portion of therapy.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for sharing these thoughts with me. I appreciate y'all. I know y'all are busy women, so I'm not going to keep you that much longer, but I appreciate y'all
I
being
would just
on.
say this one thing. I think
Sure.
pastors need to start telling their congregants and not church therapy, outside of church therapy, not necessarily counseling with your pastor, because that's what a lot of pastors want to do. Like, oh, you
And
need
a lot
therapy.
of them are not qualified to do it, but that's a
Come,
whole other
yeah, come
conversation.
talk to me and First Lady.
Right,
Pastor. That is not what you have a theological degree. Do
right,
that. Talk about the Bible and the Word. Send
right.
your congregation to licensed therapists. I believe in therapy and God. God created certain therapists. My therapist is a spiritual person who has a very good connection with God and is able to tell me things in a spiritual way if that's what I need. But she is
Mm-hmm.
not my pastor. And I think a lot of churches for our community, since you believe,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you can pray, but you also need to go to counseling. You also need to go to therapy because a lot of our trauma is centered around the church. So imagine
Well,
getting
listen,
counseling from the place
listen.
that's
Unless you're
traumatizing
gonna let
you.
me
Okay.
hire you when they come
Yeah.
for me.
I'm just saying, these pastors and churches need to start pushing their people to go outside of church for therapy so that people don't think they can pray their sadness away. I'm gonna pray this relationship away. I'm gonna, forgive my uncle who molested me and still bring my kids around him because I gotta forget. Whoa.
Right.
Let's go to counseling and get
Right.
outside of the
deacon in
church.
the church.
Yes.
Right.
And deal with it. That's what I think.
You're absolutely right. There is a lot of church trauma. We talk about church hurt on the internet. There is a lot of church trauma. And you're right. It's time for us to have the right perspective when it comes to therapy versus spiritual healing, spiritual care, to make sure that there's a healthy balance and that people are not stepping outside of their roles and trying to be therapists when they are not licensed or trained or equipped to do so, and making sure that they understand their gifts. And if you don't have that gift,
so my very first advice coming as a clinical therapist is reestablishing what your values and beliefs are as a woman. The values and beliefs that our parents gave and instilled in us. Which ones do you want to keep? Which ones do you want to let go? And which ones do you want to revise based off of the woman that you are now? Amen. And then two, not to share what's already been said, that there are other ways to be a mother, which is there is adoption, there's surrogacy, there's other ways to once again to share that gift. And so I do think that the conversation has to shift about what motherhood actually means to us as Black women, because what we have seen in literature and research is that we have been the mothers of the church for decades.
Yes,
that type of narrative has not necessarily served us well. We have many women who have died alone and died without support and have died being motherless women because of this narrative. So I do think there has to be a shift in our church, in our churches, about what it means to still serve God, but it can be restructured.
If you don't have that gift, the Lord done outlined that there are several spiritual gifts, and if that is not your gift, stay out of the lane, so that people can get the help that they need to. Let the church say amen.
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 Well, listen, I'm gonna call you Attorney Watts in this moment. Attorney Watts, where can they find you?
I am my first name and last name on Facebook. Although don't go looking for me there.
I'm so impressed people still have Facebook accounts.
So it's Law Queen B on Instagram.
Love it, love it, love it. And that's where I find her and learn more about her motherhood. Okay. Dr. Black, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on my website, and all of my contact information is there at drtamalapractice.com.
Amazing, amazing. I thoroughly enjoy this conversation. As always, y'all be putting me on the couch. Learn about my childhood, my adulthood. And I am Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club, right here on YouTube and healthybump.club on Instagram. We thank you guys for watching us, and we thank you for joining. Let us know, what do you think in the comments below? Should therapy be part of the preparation of becoming parents, or not just mothers, but also fathers as well? What has your journey been like? We want to hear from you. We thank you guys for watching. We see y'all in the next episode. And that's my favorite part. That's my favorite part. That's my favorite part. This is Dr. T, just a friendly reminder. Don't forget to comment, like, and share. And go ahead, why not? Click that subscribe button. Help us to get to the next 1,000 subscribers. We thank you guys for supporting.